Okay, so this video, I want to talk about something that I watched last night that actually was extremely enlightening. It was probably the first time that I've actually seen a true socialist. Timcast is a YouTube channel that I watch, and he had Vaush, Vaush. I'll put a link to the guy's name in the video. But he had Vaush on to just debate all kinds of different things, and I think one of the problems that we have with all of these debates is they're too open forum. The You get into too many different subjects, and then once something is nailed down, we just move on and we don't finish. And so what I wanted to do in this video is I want to go through some of the things that I think Tim could have done a better job. Tim is extremely intelligent guy. Vaush is an extremely intelligent guy. I would argue too intelligent for his own pants, because Vaush is very condescending, and I think when you watch him, you can kind of gather that he knows he's very intelligent. Unfortunately, intelligence doesn't go anywhere close to common sense. So there's intelligent people that can verbalize all kinds of minutia out of their mouth. But in reality, when you step back and ask what exactly does that mean, there's very little content there. So both Tim and Vaush are way above me in the league of vocabulary, but I think that they both missed a few things. And so I want to kind of go through that in this video. And I would love to have or see a deeper conversation with this Vaush guy, because I think his viewpoint on the world is just completely misguided. Like he thinks he's an intellectual elite, but he what he believes is just not based in reality at all, at least in my opinion. So the first thing that I wanted to mention is in the video, and it's over 3 hours long, so it's a hard watch, but it's actually very interesting if you want to have 3 hours to waste, because Tim and him go back and forth on a number of issues that I think highlights the problems that we have. So one of the things that he brought up during the interview was the whole he hates Trump. He's voted for Biden. He thinks Biden, well, he doesn't like Biden either, but he thinks Biden's better for us than Trump is. The problem with the entire thing, though, and Tim did nail him down on this a little bit, by getting more definitive on what exactly he was talking about, because he kept calling Trump a liar. He kept going on about all this stuff. And so Tim started asking him specific questions about the Russia hoax and the PP tapes and the all of the craziness, the spying and all the other stuff. And Vaughn really has no idea what the hell he's talking about. Vaush, he pretends that he's an intellectual elite, and therefore we should listen to him because he uses big words and places them in an order that makes you have to think doubly hard to try to keep up with what he's actually saying. But in reality, he has no facts, and he has no idea what's been going on with Trump and the spying and all of the other stuff. And he he said that he was very aware of it, but when he started getting nailed down with specifics, he obviously had no clue what the hell was going on or what he was talking about. So you can push this off to another person that's only watching CNN to get their news. He was also very offended about Trump bashing the news media. That he feels like that is a very bad thing to do. But he fails to realize or to even consider the fact that the media deserves every bit of what they're getting. There's no way in 2020, with all the technology and internet and the way that we communicate, that there's an excuse to have a news program that just lies to the public, because it's so easy to research what they're saying and find out that they're lying, and yet they do it anyway. And they do it because 50% of the country refuses to actually go do their own research. So they watch it and they think it's real. These people must be smarter than they are. Vaush is super smart, so therefore, whatever he says must be facts. And so, I've watched videos now that I watched the Timcast video. I've watched some videos of Vaush, and he's extremely arrogant. Like he actually thinks he is the supreme being of knowledge, and therefore the rest of us should just do what he says. So let's get into some of what he says. So one thing is, he believes that employees should own companies. Like there shouldn't be an owner. He's totally against big corporations, which, to some degree I am as well. I think Google and Facebook and these kind of, I think a company should be able to grow as big as it can within the scope of what it's doing business as. But I think when it starts to buy up other companies in order to expand its own capabilities, I think there should be some limiting factors there. I don't think Google should be able to go buy up every single company that, if they want to get into a market, then I don't really have too much of a problem with that. But when they start buying competitors or pushing competitors out based on their pricing because they're a bigger company, I do have a problem with that. I think something needs to be done in that respect. But let's go back to what Vaush believes. So he actually thinks that there shouldn't be an owner of a company, that the society should own the company. And so my question for him and to any socialist is, if you have an environment like that, let's take me as an example. So I am the owner of a fairly successful software company. And I can honestly tell you that in the early days, everybody that knew me thought I was crazy. I was working, 15, 16-hour days. I was literally living in a house by myself, programming all day long, trying to get this dream going to, that I felt like I could do better than my competitors. Now, in the time frame that I was, all of my competitors were much, much bigger than I was. In fact, one of my competitors was a huge multi-billion-dollar corporation. But I felt like I could do a better job. I felt like I could listen to the customers better. I gave better tech support. I had better software. I was ahead of everybody on the software. So I had things that I was bringing to the table. Now, according to Vaush, when I started my company, once I started getting successful, I would need to bring in employees and give them part of my company. And so the problem with people like Vaush and the people with this whole socialist agenda is that they want to start with where America is today. And I don't think that's a fair way to look at this. If you're going to start with where we are today, then you're taking advantage of all of the capitalistic things that have happened. You're taking advantage of people like me that put in more hours and more sweat than any of my employees would ever put in. I mean, I've got employees that have been with me for 15 years, but they'll tell you there's no way they would work the hours and as hard as I worked in the beginning. There's just no way. And so the question becomes, in Vaush's perfect little world, is how are you going to survive? Because what you end up with in that type of an environment is you look at it from your higher than mighty chair in heaven and you say, it would be so fair if all of these people had the same thing and we didn't have this guy over here with a bigger house and this guy over here with a nicer car. It'd be better if everything was fair and equal in between. Well, okay, that is a fancy little dream, but it's not reality, because what happens in that environment is people stop working. Like, I would never have put in the time that I put into my company had I known that I was going to end up having to share it with everybody else that didn't do anything. They were sitting playing video games while I was working my ass off, and now I got to turn around and give them stuff. I mean, they have this idea of what it means to have a company. And I'm not arguing that some companies get too big. That's not, to me, that's a whole different conversation. You get too big and start taking advantage of things. I have a problem with that, and I think things need to be done about it. But they need to be done with our current government, because our current government, our country, has allowed that type of a company to be built. It's allowed that type of an environment to exist. If you were to take what I guess here's a good question for Voss, or Vaush. I don't know how you say his name. If you were to point me to a country that does what you're talking about doing, which by the way doesn't exist, but if you were to point me to a country that does what you're talking about doing, and then tell me what they have created in that society. So let's look at China as an example. So China, if it were not for the United States giving them the manufacturing jobs that we've given to them, China has not innovated anything. They copy, they steal, they get information from other countries, and then they turn around and manufacture for cheaper because they have slave labor. But that's completely different. But that's a socialist environment. In the whole communist versus socialism thing, I don't think there's enough differences between the two of those to really have a hardcore discussion. So I consider, while it is a communist nation, I consider it a socialist nation as well. But you cannot point to a single situation in history that a socialist environment benefited the people that were involved in that environment. So, I just don't understand the logic there. You're going to completely kill any innovations. You're going to completely kill any motivations for anyone to try to do better. I didn't grow up rich. My family is not rich. I had a happy childhood and I had a good life, but I in no way. I mean, I went through winters with no heat in my house because I couldn't afford to get the heat. In fact, there are people in poverty that didn't have it as bad as I did during the time that I was starting this company. So, I take offense to someone like Vaush, that I guarantee you has never run a company in his entire life. And I don't even know what his claim to fame is, other than just being an arrogant asshole. I don't really know what it is that he is attempting to accomplish in society. He's big on socialism, but he's big on the riots. He supports the riots. He supports the built burning and all the other shit in the name of getting what you want. But he fails to recognize the fact that this country and what it is actually what allows assholes like him to exist. If he were in China espousing the bullshit that comes out of his mouth, he'd probably already be dead or he'd be in jail somewhere. So, come out against the communist countries and see how well you do. So he's taken advantage of the system in the United States to allow him a platform to espouse a bunch of nonsense that no one could ever do. And to prove it, I'd be willing, and I bet other people would too, just for the comedic value, to help him set up his company, like that he's going to give everybody the access to. Like, go ahead and get your people, and y'all get together and come up with something that you can start a company with, and let's see how well it works. We'll put you, Vaush, in charge of the whole project. But in early 1990s, I remember they had this big biosphere. Maybe you should go research what happened in that, because the fact is you take a non-governing bunch of people, you stick them together, someone is going to step up and start running everything, and there are going to be people in that environment that refuse to work. So you're going to have people they're more than happy to go to the kitchen and eat, but they're not going to go pick potatoes in order to eat them later. They're going to let somebody else do that job, and then they're going to just lay around and read a book, or do what Vaush does, which is probably little to nothing. So that's the first thing that I wish Tim had asked him. In that environment, how do you envision new companies getting started, and as a whole, do away with America, like destroy America, and let's start with your environment? How would you even get off the ground? Who's going to be the farmer? Who's going to be willing to get up at 4 a.m. and go plow a field and grow crops and let everybody else take advantage of him, and he's not going to make any more money than anybody else? He has no way to benefit from anything. He's just working his ass off so that everybody else can live. Who's going to do that? So Vaush is just living in a la-la land, thinking that any of this stuff is reality. The other thing that he mentioned is that you should have social justice for everybody. You should live in a race-free, open society that everybody gets along. The problem is that doesn't happen. Like there's nowhere in history that's ever happened. So wanting something to be true and it actually being true are completely different things. So while you want to have all this stuff, you couldn't, even in your infinite intelligence, you couldn't form such a society and actually make it successful. And I will stake money on that claim, which I'm sure that looking at some of his videos and what his house looks like, he doesn't have a whole lot of money, but he's more than willing to get up here and make fun of people that he knows nothing about. The other thing was food, medicine, all that kind of stuff is free in his society. The companies, I really don't understand how his world would work, because medicine requires money, medicine requires research, medicine requires people going to school, working hard, learning subjects that most people don't want to learn. But in his society, there's no benefit to actually putting in all that hard work, because it's not fair for that person to have more than someone else. Now, he did mention at one point that you would have hierarchies of pay, but who determines which hierarchy someone fits into? I mean, the funny thing about Vaush and everybody like him, to me they're kind of like flat earthers. They believe all this stuff, but they can't prove any of it works. So you couldn't possibly find anyone, and I'm probably one of the most motivated people around. I worked really, really hard to get where I'm at, and I can tell you right now, I wouldn't do shit in his society. Like I would do as little as possible, because everybody's getting the same thing anyway. So it goes back to the old saying of the school teacher that has all the kids, and all the kids think that everything should be fair, and that it's not fair that little Johnny gets a better score on his test than Susie got. And so the teacher averages everybody's score together and makes it all fair. But the problem is that within 3 test cycles, Johnny figures out that why is he working so hard, because he ends up with a C anyway, because little Susie gets her an F on all of her tests. And so he quits working hard because there's no motivation anymore. And this is a typical socialist society. This is what happens in them. If you're purely socialist and everybody's getting the same thing, people quit working. There's no motivation to do anything. So, good luck getting medicine or anything in Vaush's society. And which also goes back to the, free access to everything. So you want cable TV, you want college, you want medicine, you want whatever. Everything is free. So, Tim did a really good job having this conversation with him. Tim's very polite, and they had a good conversation. And again, I think it is a very useful thing to go watch, just because it was a very polite conversation. They intellectually conversed between each other instead of screaming over each other or getting offended or anything else. Tim did get offended there, and rightly so, due to the Vaush and his back and forth and arrogance and not listening to what Tim was saying. But he did it in a polite way. So the entire interview was it was a good interview. So if you get time, go watch it. But if Tim gets to interview this guy again, I hope that he picks one subject and just beats the hell out of it for 2 hours. Like, don't jump around into a bunch of different things because you can't solve a problem. Like, you're not going to come to a conclusion when you're allowing the person that you've cornered, that now finally has to admit that they're, right or wrong, to change subjects and branch off into something else. And that's exactly what happens in all these interviews. That's why I hate the way that a lot of these people are doing these interviews. I think it would have been better to say, hey, we're going to be talking about Russia conspiracy and the reason that you hate Trump. That's all we're going to discuss during the next thing. So come prepared to defend your position. Whatever it happens to be, keep it to a single subject and stay on topic. Because these people that believe socialism is real, they have been brainwashed in college. Vaush is definitely a college educated kid. He's very, very articulate. He's very, very arrogant. He thinks that he should be the one to dictate how everybody else lives their lives because he's got all the answers, because he's read all these social justice books, and he therefore is more enlightened than the rest of us. But the problem is that what people like Vaush and any of these socialists believe, it's not real, and it would never work. It has never worked, and they couldn't set up an environment that they could make it work. And I would challenge him to do that. If he feels so strongly that a conservative is crazy and he's got all the answers, then how come we're successful and he's not? Why is he not setting up this environment? Go get all of his friends that I'm sure believe the same shit. Why don't y'all form a company? Show us how this stuff works. Show us what goes on in this kind of world and how friendly and awesome it is and how much productivity you get out of it, instead of reading dumbass other college students writing reports about how awesome it might be if you could pull it off.